In the quiet stillness that envelops the soul when the world's clamor fades, there emerges a whisper, an elusive call that speaks not to the ears but to the very core of our being. It is here in this sacred silence that the truth begins to stir. The path we seek, the one that promises awakening, insight, and profound transformation, does not unveil itself amidst the crowd or within the echo chamber of collective expectation. Rather, it is a solitary revelation, a secret carved not by the footsteps of many, but by the singular journey of one who dares to walk alone. Imagine a vast cosmic canvas, woven from threads of starlight and shadow, where countless trails shimmer briefly, only to dissipate like morning mist. Among these myriad trails lies the true path, not marked by the footprints of companions or illuminated by the lanterns of consensus, but hidden beneath the surface of habitual sight. It is a path that reveals itself only when the traveler steps away from the chorus of voices and the reassuring handholds of shared beliefs. This solitary voyage is not a banishment into loneliness, but an initiation into the profound architecture of existence, where the soul learns to decipher the celestial language etched into the fabric of reality. There is a paradox humming in the very idea that the path is revealed only in solitude. Human nature is drawn to connection, to communion, to the warmth of shared experience. It is how culture, knowledge, and survival win through the generations. Yet in the deepest chambers of consciousness, where light bends and time folds inward, the ultimate truths unfold not as a collective hymn, but as a quiet, singular song. The path is not a well-trodden highway, but an uncharted river flowing through the inner landscape, visible only to those who relinquish the comfort of certainty and venture into the unknown. This venture beyond the familiar is not simply a journey in space, but a profound metamorphosis in being. Walking alone becomes an act of sacred defiance against the gravitational pull of conformity. It is as if the very universe conspires to strip away the distractions and attachments that cloud perception, urging the seeker into a luminous solitude where the mind slows, the heart listens, and the boundaries dissolve like salt into the sea. In this vulnerable state, the path no longer needs to be pointed out. It appears, as if from the ether, a ribbon of light unspooling beneath the traveler's feet. To walk alone is to become a cosmic pioneer, navigating through inner galaxies where the stars are memories, fears, and dreams. It is here that the alchemy of self unfolds, transmuting the base elements of doubt and uncertainty into the gold of awakening. The solitude is not emptiness but a fertile void, pregnant with the seeds of wisdom that only the silent soil of introspection can nurture. Each step taken in this isolation is a dialogue with the infinite, a tuning into the subtle harmonies that resonate beneath the surface of existence. Consider how, in ancient myths and esoteric teachings, the seeker must often face the wilderness alone, whether it is the desert's scorching expanse, the labyrinth's twisting corridors, or the mountain's breathless summit. These solitary encounters are rites of passage, symbolic mirrors, reflecting the inner journey from fragmentation toward unity. The path, in such narratives, is less a road laid out before the feet and more a revelation of the self hidden beneath layers of illusion. Walking alone is the crucible in which the soul's true nature is forged, and in this crucible, the disguised architecture of reality begins to reveal itself. Yet the solitude demanded by this path is not the loneliness of isolation, but the profound embrace of self. It is an invitation to shed the personas imposed by society, the facades built to fit expectation, and to step naked into the cosmic light of authenticity. The path that reveals itself in solitude is therefore not only a journey outward into the unknown, but a return home, home to the silent sanctuary of the soul, where the mysteries of existence unfold in eternal present moments. In practical terms, this means that no external map, no social consensus, no communal ritual can substitute for the courage to face the self alone. The path is not a shared itinerary but a deeply personal pilgrimage, and its unveiling depends on a kind of radical attentiveness to one's own inner landscape. This radical solitude is a mirror reflecting the hidden architecture of consciousness itself, the latticework of thoughts, feelings, and energies that constitute our experience of existence. When we walk alone, unburdened by the noise of others, we begin to perceive the subtle currents that guide us, currents that are otherwise drowned beneath the tide of collective distraction. The paradoxical truth is that walking alone connects us most profoundly to the universe, to the eternal present, and to the vast, uncharted terrain of our own inner cosmos. It is a path that defies the logic of crowds and systems, revealing instead the hidden laws that govern awakening, transformation, and the expansion of consciousness. To walk it is to become attuned to the whispered geometry of existence, the pulse of creation beating within each solitary step. Thus, when we say that the path only reveals itself when you walk alone, we speak not of physical solitude alone, but of a spiritual and existential solitude, a state of being where the self stands in quiet communion with the infinite. It is a surrender to the mystery and a willingness to be led by the subtle, unseen hand of cosmic intelligence. It is an act of faith in the unseen architecture of reality, where each solitary step is both a question and an answer, a movement into the darkness and a passage toward the light. In this unfolding journey, the seemingly lonely walk becomes a dance with the universe itself, an orchestration where the solitary traveler and the infinite cosmos meet in a timeless embrace. The path is less a destination and more a continuous unveiling, a cosmic poem written in the language of silence, solitude, and profound becoming. To walk alone, then, is to step through the veil into the sacred unknown where the path, like a secret river beneath frozen ground, flows quietly and inexorably toward awakening. There is an ancient rhythm to the cosmos, a subtle cadence that unfolds beyond the surface clamor of existence, and it is within this rhythm that the essence of walking alone reveals its deepest truths. To wander a path solitary is to engage with the primordial pulse underlying all manifestation, a pulse that resists the imposed patterns of collective expectation and shines a light instead on the fractal geometry of individual awakening. The path is not laid out in neat milestones or clear signposts dictated by the crowd, but rather inscribed in the invisible contours of being, where each step taken alone becomes an act of peeling back the veils of illusion and encountering the raw architecture of reality. At the heart of this truth lies the recognition that the world as commonly perceived is a vast theater of illusions, woven from the threads of consensus and conditioned belief. These illusions shape the fabric of our shared experience, generating a mirage of certainty and belonging that often obscures the underlying contours of the path meant only for the solitary seeker. To walk alone is to slip between the cracks of this shared dream, to step outside the familiar choreography of societal rhythms, and in that silent divergence, the path begins to shimmer. It is here that the traveler begins to see the subtle difference between the shadow and the substance, between the familiar patterns of herd mentality and the erratic yet authentic pulse of true self-discovery. The guiding pillars of this journey rest upon a few profound realizations which, like cosmic lighthouses, illuminate the darkened corridors of inner exploration. Central among them is the notion that true knowledge, the kind that transforms rather than merely informs, cannot be handed down as a finished map. It must be drawn out in the crucible of solitude, forged step by step through the alchemical process of direct experience. In walking alone, the seeker learns to decode the language of silence, that eloquent and enigmatic dialect spoken not through words, but through the shifting tides of consciousness itself. This language speaks of universal truths that evade the grasp of the mind, arriving instead as flashes of insight and the gentle nudges of intuition, the very whispers of the cosmic fabric woven into the threads of our individual soul. Another pillar emerges from the interplay between freedom and surrender. The path cannot be walked if the traveler is shackled by fears, dependencies, or the desperate need for external validation. To walk alone is first to confront and dissolve these bindings, allowing oneself the radical freedom to be untethered from collective narratives. Yet paradoxically, this freedom is not a chaotic frontier, but a sacred surrender to the hidden intelligence that animates all existence. It is an acknowledgement that the path reveals itself only when we stop grasping and begin to listen, when the ego's restless grasp loosens its hold and yields to the fluid, unfolding mystery. This surrender is not passivity, but a dynamic engagement with the unknown, an openness that invites the path to step forward from the shadows and merge with our solitary footsteps. Underlying these pillars is a universal pattern echoed throughout the hidden geometries of nature and consciousness alike: the spiral. The solitary path is seldom linear. It coils inwards and outwards, folding through dimensions of self and other, light and shadow, question and answer. Each solitary step is both a descent and an ascent, a journey into the subterranean caves of the soul, and an emergence into the expansive luminescence of awareness. The spiral is a metaphor for the way the path only reveals itself progressively, never upfront or fully visible, but always beckoning the traveler forth through its intricate looping. This cosmic pattern reminds us that walking alone is not a lonely march toward an endpoint, but a winding dance with the infinite, an eternal rhythm that hums in the core of every atom and every heartbeat. The boundary between illusion and truth, between the external world and our internal cosmos, becomes porous on this path. When surrounded by others, our perceptions are often refracted through the prism of collective assumptions and the comforting yet confining narratives that bind consciousness into fixed shapes. Walking alone tears these prisms apart, allowing light to pass without distortion, revealing the raw colors beneath the smoke and mirrors. It is in this state that one comes face to face with the paradoxical nature of reality, simultaneously fluid and structured, chaotic yet harmonized, an orchestration of cosmic laws that are rarely visible to the crowded eye, but palpably experienced when the self stands uncloaked in solitude. Embedded within the journey is the theme of time as a pliable dimension. The path walked alone flows in sync, not with the ticking of clocks or the march of calendars, but with the rhythm of the eternal present. Each solitary step becomes a portal beyond linear time, a moment where past and future dissolve into the endless now. This timelessness is a cornerstone of awakened existence, an invitation to participate in the cosmic dance outside the constraints of conventional chronology. Here, walking alone is less about physical isolation and more about attuning one's consciousness to the ceaseless unfolding of what is, an experiential alignment with the eternal moment, where the path reveals itself not as a destination ahead, but as a living, breathing mystery beneath one's feet. Indeed, the path whispers to those who are willing to listen, not through grand revelations or dramatic epiphanies, but in the subtle language of synchronicity and signs that ripple through the fabric of solitude. It is in the quiet spaces between thoughts, in the pauses where the mind rests, that this language most clearly emerges. To walk alone is to cultivate a heightened sensitivity to these cosmic murmurs, to become a receptive instrument tuning into the frequencies of universal intelligence. This attunement transcends intellect and dogma, evoking a knowing that is felt rather than explained, a wisdom that is lived rather than taught. What stands revealed in this solitary revelation is that the path is not a fixed trail carved into the earth, but an ever-shifting constellation of possibilities, a secret geography drawn by the contours of one's unique soul. To walk it alone is to embrace the sacred responsibility of authorship over one's awakening, to become both the cartographer and the traveler of this inner terrain. There is a profound sovereignty in this act, a reclaiming of the self from the impositions of external authority and collective judgment. This sovereignty is not isolation in the sense of separation, but a radiant aloneness that pulses with the lifeblood of universal connection. Thus, the core concepts intertwined in this journey paint a paradoxical portrait that the deepest connection, the most profound revelation, arises not in numbers or crowds, but in the singular presence of the solitary walker. The path is a mirror held up to the individual soul, reflecting both the shadows it must face and the luminous potentials it holds. It is a secret unveiled only when one is willing to step alone into the vast wilderness of inner and outer unknowns, when the soul dares to move beyond the comforting illusions of belonging and steps into the sacred solitude, where the universe itself conspires to reveal its greatest mysteries. In the unfolding chapters of this exploration, we will trace the symbolic narratives that echo these ideas, plumbing the depths of metaphor and myth to illuminate the invisible architecture beneath the path. Yet even now, the guiding pillars stand firmly. The surrender to silence, the freedom found beyond fear, the spiral dance of time and consciousness, and the piercing clarity that solitude alone can bring. For it is by walking alone and walking with hearts unguarded, minds open and spirits attuned, that the path, like a secret current beneath the surface of a restless sea, makes itself known in all its wild, wondrous fullness. There is a tale whispered among the ancient trees, a parable tucked in the folds of time like a secret syllable only the wind can carry. A lone traveler set forth on a path that shimmered faintly under the silver gaze of a crescent moon. This path was not etched by footsteps of many nor guided by lanterns of certainty. It was a thread woven from the fabric of solitude, stretching beyond sight into realms unseen. The traveler, bereft of companions, moved not with haste but with a steady unfolding, each footfall a quiet prayer to the unknown. As shadows lengthened and stars stitched their stories across the sky, the traveler discovered that the path was not a road to be conquered, but a song to be heard, a melody only audible when one dares to listen in the hush of being alone. This allegory mirrors the hidden law that the journey of awakening is less a march toward a destination and more a deep dive into the self's silent abyss. The traveler's solitude is not desolation, but a sacred vessel, an echo chamber where the soul's faintest whispers become thunderous truths. Here, the path reveals itself not in landscapes mapped by others, but in vistas that expand only when one's eyes adjust to the dim light of inner reflection. The traveler's steps dissolve the illusion of a fixed way. Instead, the path curves, folds, and shimmers in response to the presence of solitary courage. In this sacred aloneness, the journey transforms from external traversal to internal revelation. Another story emerges from the heart of the desert, where a hermit dwelled in a cavernous cliffside, sustained by the relentless sun and solitude's austere embrace. The hermit spoke often of the anatomy of loneliness, a sacred architecture built by the cracks of separation. To the untrained eye, the hermit's days were emptiness. To the awakened, they were a crucible. One day, a seeker arrived, burdened by the weight of crowds and the clamor of many voices, desperate for clarity. The hermit offered no guidance but invited the seeker to sit in silence atop the jagged precipice. Hours passed, and the seeker's mind writhed in impatience. Then, as the sun melted into twilight, a subtle shift occurred. The desert's breath harmonized with the seeker's own. The walls of isolation began to shimmer with the light of unseen aquifers. It was in that moment of surrendered solitude that the seeker glimpsed the path not laid out before the feet, but traced within the heart's cavern. This narrative paints a portrait of the inner landscape, where the path is not a surface mapped by logic or consensus, but an undercurrent of truth accessible only through the gate of solitude. The hermit's teaching reveals that aloneness is not a void but a womb, a fertile darkness where the seeds of authentic knowing take root. The seeker's transformation is emblematic of a deeper cosmic rhythm, that true clarity, the unveiling of one's unique journey, requires the silent dissolution of the self's masks, which only solitude can enact. In this quiet crucible, the soul sheds the sediment of inherited meaning and begins to trace its own sacred geometry. Across the oceans of myth, the story of the lone star emerges, a distant sun wandering the celestial sphere without a constellation to call its own. The star's light is solitary, impervious to the companionship of neighboring orbs, yet its brilliance is unwavering, a beacon that carves through the infinite night. In time, stories say, the lone star's light ignited a constellation, a gathering born not of proximity but of resonance. The star's solitary flame was the crucible from which a new cosmic pattern was born, a testament to the power of singular vision that ultimately shapes communal recognition. This cosmic metaphor unfolds the paradox at the heart of our theme. The path reveals itself only when walked alone because the singularity of purpose, unblurred by collective expectations, has the power to illuminate not just the self's way, but also to ripple outward, birthing new constellations of meaning. The lone star's journey reflects a universal principle etched in the architecture of reality itself, that individuality is the seedbed of collective evolution. By walking alone, the traveler becomes a celestial forge, a crucible of light whose solitary flame summons the stars to dance in new alignments. In a quieter, earthbound parable, there is the story of a river orphaned by many branching streams, flowing through a deep forest unseen by any but the ancient stones and the occasional whispering breeze. This river, solitary and uncharted, carved a hidden valley over epochs, shaping a world within itself untouched by the common eye. Travelers often seek broad rivers that bore commerce and noise, yet the solitary river's path was a slow revelation, a living metaphor for the journey that unfolds only in the absence of crowds. It whispered secrets to the moss, traced invisible circuits beneath the roots, and in its patient solitude became the wellspring of new life, unpolluted by haste or distraction. Here, the river's course becomes a metaphor for the inner journey whose flow can only be discerned when the clamor of others ceases to drown out the subtle song of the self. The river's solitary path is the hidden current beneath existence's surface, a living emblem of the soul's passage through the thickness of worldly illusion into the crystalline clarity of personal truth. It teaches that the path's revelation is a temporal unfolding, shaped by patience and the willingness to be alone with the slow, mysterious pulse of becoming. Returning to the realm of trees, there is the ancient myth of the solitary oak, standing on a hill apart from the dense forest. The oak grows strong and vast, its roots delving deep into the earth's unseen heart, its branches reaching boldly into the sky alone. The forest around it murmurs with collective life, but the oak's strength is born of its singular solitude. It weathers storms no smaller tree could endure, not because it stands apart in stubborn isolation, but because, in its aloneness, it has discovered the profound depths of resilience and wisdom. This myth embodies the paradox that solitary walking is not a flight from the world, but a courageous encounter with the depths of one's own being. The oak thrives because it embraces the aloneness that fosters profound growth. Its story is a living scripture carved in bark and leaf, inviting us to find in solitary steps the strength to face the tempests of change and to stand unwavering in the winds of uncertainty. Each of these stories, of the traveler beneath moonlight, the hermit in the desert, the lone star wandering the cosmic sea, the secret river carving valleys unseen, and the solitary oak rooted against the storm, interlace to form a symbolic constellation that illuminates the deeper truth at the heart of our exploration. The path reveals itself only when walked alone because solitude is the crucible where the soul's unique blueprint emerges, free from echoes, free from shadows cast by others. It is in this sacred aloneness that the universe's hidden architecture unfolds, not as a rigid map, but as a living dance of light and shadow, of silence and sound, of absence and presence. To walk alone is to enter this sacred theater where the self becomes both the actor and the audience, the question and the answer, the seeker and the revelation. It is here that the path is not found but born, an intimate genesis forged in the fires of solitude, a cosmic mystery unraveled one solitary step at a time. The ethereal dance of solitude, though cloaked in cosmic mystery and ancient myth, is not an otherworldly abstraction reserved only for ascetics or dreamers lost in metaphysical reverie. On the contrary, this sacred solitude, this solitary walking into the depth of one's own being, seeps into the fabric of our everyday reality like a gentle current shaping the contours of a riverbed. The path that reveals itself in isolation, the one that only unveils its terrain when footsteps fall quietly without the loud chorus of others, offers an alchemical transformation not just in the inner sanctum, but in the palpable, clamoring world where we live, work, love, and strive. This transformation does not demand withdrawal into distant caves or cosmic voids, but invites the conscious cultivation of space, space in thought, space in emotion, space in decision-making, where the soul might listen deeply, uninterrupted by the echoes and shadows cast by external expectations. To walk alone, then, becomes less about physical solitude and more about the sacred act of self-engagement, a profound turning inward amid the noise of the modern world. It encourages a kind of attentiveness to the subtleties of one's own inner landscape, a willingness to sit with discomfort and uncertainty without the crutches of immediate validation or distraction. In practical terms, this means that moments as ordinary as a solitary walk through a busy city park, a pause in the midst of a hectic day to simply breathe without reaction, or even the deliberate choice to withhold opinions for a time, become portals to that inner path's gentle unveiling. It is in these quiet, often overlooked instances that the mind unfastens itself from the habitual patterns of anxiety and comparison, allowing the hidden compass within to faintly pulse and point the way forward. The implications spill over into the choices we make and the relationships we navigate. When the path is truly walked alone, it fosters an authenticity that cannot be borrowed or mimicked. There is a certain courage required to stand bare before the world without the comfortable masks of conformity or social armor, and it is this very vulnerability that births genuine connection. Paradoxically, solitude grounded in self-awareness creates a magnetic presence, one that does not cling or demand but simply is, like the solitary oak whose deep roots nourish it in storms, a presence that invites others not to mirror, but to witness the raw and radiant truth of being. This means that, in relationships, we become less dependent on validation and more interested in the mutual dance of growth, free from the distortion of codependence or the echoes of collective fear. The path revealed in solitude is the path of relational integrity, where boundaries are drawn not as walls of separation, but as clearings in the forest where mutual respect and individual authenticity coexist. In the sphere of work and creation, the principle that the path only reveals itself when walked alone sparks an essential shift. The relentless drive for external approval, the noise of competing voices and trending opinions can drown the whisper of original insight. Yet, when one allows oneself the sanctity of solitude, the creative spark ignites in its own time and rhythm, untethered by the frantic chorus of external demands. This does not imply isolation from collaboration or community, but highlights the importance of carving out sacred time and space for deep reflection, intuition, and the unhurried gestation of ideas. Many of the world's most transformative works, be it art, science, or spiritual teaching, have quietly gestated in the fertile silence of solitary contemplation before bursting forth into the collective sphere. In everyday life, this might be the willingness to step away from the endless scroll of distraction, to let thoughts settle like sediment, and to listen for the subtle guidance that emerges when the mind is uncluttered by external noise. Moreover, the path of walking alone opens a unique portal to resilience and adaptability in the face of life's inevitable shifts. When one fully embraces the solitary journey, there develops an intimate familiarity with the self that acts as a steady anchor amid external chaos. This inner grounding is not rigid but fluid, allowing for flexibility without losing the core sense of identity. Here lies a profound practical gift. In solitude, we cultivate the inner sovereignty to navigate uncertainty with grace rather than fear. Decisions that once seemed paralyzing become invitations to dance with the unknown because the traveler, though alone, is not lost but deeply attuned to an intuitive map, a sacred navigation system woven from lived experience, reflection, and spiritual insight. This inner map is the path itself, revealing turns and crossroads not from external signs, but from the silent guidance of a heart that has learned to walk alone, and in doing so, to truly see. Even in the mundane rhythms of daily living, the wisdom of solitary walking invites a renewed relationship with time and presence. Life's hurried pace often presses us into reactive patterns, decisions made in haste or under the weight of others' expectations. But the path that unfolds when one walks alone insists on a different tempo, a rhythm that honors the pauses between moments, the stillness within movement. It calls us to listen to the quiet sighs of the soul beneath the clamor of routine, to find meaning not in frantic achievement but in the deep experience of being. This mindful presence, cultivated in solitude, seeps into how we engage with the world, making even ordinary acts, preparing a meal, tending a garden, sharing a conversation, imbued with a sacred intentionality that transforms them into rites of passage on the path. Ultimately, the gift of walking the path alone in our modern lives is the reclaiming of agency and sovereignty over our own stories. It invites an honoring of the sacred architecture that underlies our existence, a recognition that the universe does not deliver pre-written scripts, but offers instead a creative canvas sculpted by each solitary step taken with awareness and courage. Our choices, shaped in the quiet crucible of aloneness, reverberate outward, transforming not only our own inner worlds but also touching the collective fabric in subtle yet profound ways. To walk alone is to acknowledge the mystery of the self as both infinite and fragile, to embrace the paradox of being uniquely singular and yet deeply interconnected. This conscious solitude becomes a practice of awakening, not withdrawal but a luminous engagement with the cosmic dance, where the path is not a destination but a living unfolding that reveals itself only in the sacred silence between steps. As the twilight of our exploration deepens, the tapestry we have woven together begins to shimmer with a quiet, undeniable truth. The path, delicate, elusive and shimmering like the mirage of a distant star, unfolds only in the sacred solitude of the walker's own footsteps. This journey, unlike any measured by maps or crowds, is a cosmic unfolding that requires the tender courage to step beyond the familiar echoes of collective expectation into the boundless expanse of one's own being. Within this solitudinous pilgrimage lies the paradox that fuels all true awakening. To be utterly alone is to be profoundly connected, to find the breadth of the universe reflected in the narrow corridor of one's singular, unfolding moment. The path is not laid out as a series of signposts or paved avenues. It is a delicate architecture made not of stone or ink, but of silence and solitude, of questions breathed into the void and answered only in the subtle language of the soul. It is a living rhythm, a melody that cannot be heard amid the clamor of external noise. Only when the world's distractions recede, when the crowd's clamor fades into a distant hum, does the inner compass begin to hum, directing the traveler beyond the terrain of form and into the terrain of essence. The act of walking alone is the radical commitment to this inner compass, to honoring the sacred whispers that arise in the stillness, turning away from the well-worn paths of inherited beliefs and societal narratives that often serve as convenient illusions of security. To walk alone is to enter into a dance with the unknown, a cosmic invitation to co-create the journey moment by moment, step by fragile step. It is to embrace the vulnerability of bare feet touching uncharted earth, the uncertainty of the darkened forest where the eyes strain but see only shifting shadows, and the silent promise that the path itself will reveal its form precisely, because it is not yet written. This is the heart of the alchemical transformation, the surrender to the flow of becoming, where the walker relinquishes the illusion of control and embraces the mystery that the universe continuously unfolds from its own hidden source. In that surrender, the solitary traveler discovers the paradoxical core of their existence, that the self is both a fleeting mirage and an eternal flame, a reflection of the cosmos itself, flickering with infinite possibility. Yet this is not a call to isolation or withdrawal, but a beckoning toward the most luminous form of engagement. The path walked alone is deeply relational in its essence, connected not through proximity, but through resonance, not through shared footsteps, but through the shimmering of souls that recognize their solitary quests within the collective mosaic. This solitude carves space for genuine presence, where each encounter becomes a portal to deeper awareness, and each silence holds the potential for communion beyond words. From this spacious ground arises a new kind of courage, the courage to face one's own shadows without the crutches of distraction, to meet the self with an unconditional openness that then ripples outward, touching the world with authenticity and grace. In the final reckoning, the path reveals itself not as a place to arrive, but as an eternal unfolding, an intimate dialogue between the seeker and the cosmos that sings in the spaces between breaths. To walk alone is to become the sacred scribe of one's own myth, inscribing a story insubstantial in form, yet vast in its reach. A story that dissolves linear time and embraces the spiral dance of existence, where each solitary step is both a question and an answer, a letting go and a coming home. This realization invites a profound transformation, a shift in perception that recognizes the hidden architecture of reality, the interconnected web where every moment of solitude births new galaxies of insight. Every quiet step echoes with universal significance. May you, who read these words, feel the quiet summons in your own heart, a gentle urging toward that sacred aloneness where the path breathes into being beneath your feet. In your moments of stillness and separation, may you find not emptiness but plenitude, not loss but the reverent gain of self-discovery. The cosmos awaits your solitary dance, the mysterious journey only you can walk, where the path becomes visible because you have dared to step alone into the sacred unknown. And in that daring, may the infinite unfold itself within you, revealing the eternal truth, that to walk alone is to walk into the deepest embrace of who you truly are.